2. Historiography, Indian tradition. Introduction to Historiography, Indian tradition. Hello again, students. Hope you're all doing great. As you may recall, during our last session, we'd learnt about the Western tradition of historiography. In today's session, we'll be learning about the tradition of historiography that took place in the Indian subcontinent. I'm sure you're all once again ready to experience this vast and magical journey called history. Historiography in the ancient period of Indian history. Just as with other civilizations in existence, at the time, the ancient period in India was characterized by preservation and propagation of the great deeds of ancestors and mythological figures, along with transitions in the social field in the form of oral recitals. Let us turn our attention towards the projection screen. Seen here are various articles that belong from the Indus Valley Civilization period. If we look closely, we can also see various seals which have some inscriptions on them. The existence of various Harappan seals, along with other artifacts, strongly confirmed that Indians had mastered the art of writing as early as the 3rd millennium BCE, or perhaps even prior to this timeline. However, quite a few of these scripts are not yet successfully deciphered. The earliest known written documents of historical nature were found in India, dated to the 3rd century BCE in the form of inscriptions. This timeline also witnessed the Mauryan Empire, which was founded in 321 BCE, reach its zenith under the rule of Emperor Ashoka Maurya. He had ordered his royal edicts to be inscribed on natural rocks and stone pillars. Have a look at this copper plate inscription discovered at Sohagaura, situated in present-day Gorakhpur district in Uttar Pradesh, which is believed to have existed during the Mauryan period. The inscription seen on it is in Brahmi script. The first two symbols seen at the beginning of the inscription, known as tree in railing and mountain, are also seen on a number of punch-marked coins prevalent during that time period. Another symbol, which appears to be some sort of structure erected on 4 pillars, was supposed to depict a granary. Therefore, after taking into consideration various symbols and their meanings, one can deduce this inscription to be a sort of royal decree, stating the storage of food grains in the granary, followed by careful distribution, especially during the times of famine. From the 1st century CE onwards, inscriptions which provided important historical information began to be seen on coins, metal images, and sculptures. along with copper plates. Through these inscriptions, one could obtain information about the dates of accession of various kings, dynastic genealogies, territorial extents, and administration of various empires and kingdoms, as also important political events, social organization, climate, famines, etc., prevalent during those times. The tradition of Indian historiography is incomplete without mentioning the ancient Indian epics, namely the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Other literary works, which include the Puranas, Jain and Buddhist texts, historical accounts by Indian authors, and travelogues by foreign travelers are also considered as important sources in the study of ancient Indian history. The writing of biographies of kings and dynastic histories marked an important step in Indian historiography. For instance, Harsha a biography of the Indian emperor Harshavardhana, was written during the 7th century CE by his court poet Banabhatta. The Harsha ranked as the first historical biography in Sanskrit and portrayed a realistic picture of the social, economic, political, religious, and cultural life prevalent during Emperor Harshavardhana's reign. Now that we are well versed with the evolution of historiography that transpired during the ancient period of the Indian subcontinent, let us turn our attention towards the medieval period of the Indian subcontinent, which lasted from 6th century to the 16th century CE. Historiography in the medieval period in India. The tradition of historiography during the medieval period was categorized into two branches, namely Hindu and Muslim. Under the former came the famous chronicle Rajatarangini, River of the Kings, written by Kalhana during the 12th century CE. It was the earliest source for studying the history of Kashmir and was quite close to the concept of modern historiography. Kalhana himself had mentioned that this text was written after critically examining various sources like inscriptions, coins, remains of ancient monuments, dynastic records, and local traditions. Under the second branch, namely the Muslim medieval Indian historiography, one cannot overlook the contribution of Al-Biruni, regarded as one of the greatest scholars of the medieval Islamic era. This branch of historiography was also influenced by the work of historians in the courts of different Muslim rulers, who in turn were influenced by Arabic and Persian historiography. Few of them include Hasan Nizami's Tajul Ma'assir, Minaj-e-Siraj's Tabakat-e-Nasiri, various works by Amir Khusro, Tuzuki Timuri, the autobiography of Temuri Lang, also known as Amir Timur, who invaded India during the 14th century CE. Tarikh-i Mubarak Shahi by Yahya bin Ahmad Sirhindi, etc. Their accounts provided us with valuable and historic information on the Delhi Sultanate period. However, the chief most among these galaxy of literary marvels was Ziauddin Barani from 1285 to 1357 CE. In his Tarikh-i Firoz Shahi, he had stated the purpose of historiography. According to him, the duty of a historian was not only restricted to chronicling a particular ruler's valor and welfare policies, but also present the very same ruler's failings and incorrect policies in an unbiased manner. Barani further stated that a historian should also take into consideration the impact of the teachings of the wise and learned holy saints on the cultural life of the local population. In this manner, Barani was able to expand the scope of historiography. Historiography, compiled by historians in the Mughal courts, chiefly included shower of praises on the emperors and exhibition of loyalty towards their masters. The custom of adding suitable poetic quotes and beautiful pictures were also introduced in their works. Babur, the founder of the Mughal Empire, had written an autobiography entitled Tuzuki Babari that contained descriptions of various battles he had engaged in and emerged victorious from. Furthermore, Babur recorded minute observations made by him during his travel around various regions and cities, including local economy, customs, and flora and fauna. Abul Fazl's Akbar Nama, a biography on Emperor Akbar, was compiled from the viewpoint of critical historiography. His method of collecting authentic historical documents, followed by its thorough scrutiny, was looked upon as being devoid of any inherent bias and was hence deemed as a realistic source for the study of medieval India. The Hindu tradition of medieval historiography would once again be resurrected with the emergence of the Bakhar, derived from the Arabic word khabar, or information. It contained eulogies of heroes and ballads of various historical events, battles, lives of great men, etc. There are various types of Bakhars written in the Modi script of the Marathi language. Chief among them include the Sabhasad Bakhar, written during the reign of Chhatrapati Rajaram Maharaj by Krishnaji Anant Sabhasad, who was also an official in Chhatrapati Shivaji's administration. As a result, this Bakhar is considered to be authentic and important historical source in order to obtain information about the rule of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Another Bakhar entitled Bhausahibanchi Bakhar described the battle of Panipat, while another Bakhar entitled Panipatchi Bakhar described about the same event as well. Holkaranchi Bakhar provided information on the Holkar dynasty and their contribution towards expansion of the Maratha rule in the Indian subcontinent during the mid-18th century CE. Bakhars can be divided into various categories such as biographies of kings, dynastic history, descriptions of events, sectarian history, autobiographies, grievance redressal on the basis of mythologies and state administration by a king. The study of medieval India is further incomplete without referring to the accounts of foreign travelers in India. Among them are Ibn Battuta, Abdul Razak, Marco Polo, Niccolo Conti, Duarte Barbosa, and Domingo Pace. Their accounts provide us with historic information of medieval India. Ishwardas Nagar, Bhimsen Saxena, Hafi Khan, and Nicolau Manucci were among the foremost historians of Aurangzeb's reign, whose accounts act as important sources for the study of Mughal history in particular and Indian history in general. So, you see, students, the medieval period was a golden age for Indian historiography. The writings of not only the indigenous but foreign chroniclers as well helped us in better understanding of the general atmosphere that prevailed in the Indian subcontinent. However, Indian historiography would receive further impetus with the establishment of British rule in the Indian subcontinent, which lasted from late 18th to mid 20th century CE. Historiography in the modern period in India. During the 20th century CE, Indian archaeological exploration and research had formally commenced under the auspices of the British. As a result, a number of ancient sites were excavated, particularly under the supervision of Sir Alexander Cunningham, a British Army engineer who was also the first Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, ASI. He excavated these sites on the basis of their locations mentioned in Buddhist texts. An epoch-making moment of this period was the discovery of the Indus Valley or Harappan civilization during the tenure of Sir John Marshall. Due to this discovery, the antiquity of Indian history was traced back to the 3rd millennium BCE or even earlier. Many British officials during their stay in India had written about Indian history. Their writings displayed strong influence of the colonial policies of the British on every aspect of the Indian subcontinent. However, there were some British scholars who took keen interest in diligently studying the glorious past of India, who was fondly referred to as the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. 3 volumes of the History of British India, written by James Mill, were published in 1817 CE. This was the first book on Indian history written by a British officer. It clearly reflected an absence of objective perspective and prejudice about various aspects of the Indian culture. The History of India, written by Mountstuart Elphinston, who was also the governor of Bombay, now Mumbai, was published in 1841 CE. The period of Maratha Empire is very important in Indian history, and Grant Duff's name stands out in this regard among various British officers, historians, and scholars of the time. He wrote a book entitled A History of the Marathas, 1826, which was published in 3 volumes. Grant Duff's writing also displayed the British inclination of condemning Indian culture and history. A similar tendency was also witnessed in Lieutenant Colonel James Todd's writings about Rajasthan's history in his book Annals and Antiquities of Rajasthan, or the Central and Western Rajput States of India, 1832. The 2 volumes of A Statistical Account of Assam, 1879, written by William Wilson Hunter on Indian history, showed a somewhat impartial treatment of the concerned subject. Neelkant Janardhan Kirtane and Vishwanath Kashinath Rajwade were 2 Indian historians who took up the task of exposing the limitations of Grant Duff's writing. Indian historiography, various ideological frameworks. Colonial historiography. Indian history during the late 18th and early 19th century CE was studied and written by British scholar officials, historians, and Christian missionaries. James Mill, in his book The History of British India, in 1817, wrote that Indians were crude and excelled in the qualities of a slave. Similarly, another British historian, Vincent Smith, in his book History of India, from 6th century BC to Mohammedan conquest, 1906, tried to prove that Europeans were superior in warfare than Indians, and further stated that the perennial political chaos in India and their inability to unite and rule themselves made British rule absolutely permanent in India. Mountstuart Elphinston, the administrator turned historian, in his book The History of India, 1841, mentioned that early Indian foreign trade was chiefly conducted by Greeks and the Arabs, which, with the passage of time, made it easy for the latter to overrun India as they had Persia. These British historians often underestimated Indian culture and suggested the lowest possible dates for the compilation of the Vedas and the 2 great Indian epics, namely the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Furthermore, they had alleged that Indians borrowed their culture from the Greeks, although they failed to provide any evidence in that regard. These scholar officials mischievously professed that Indian drama, mathematics, philosophy, and astronomy were a direct derivation of the Greek civilization, and the popular Krishna culture of India had probably developed from that of Jesus Christ. The Christian missionaries, on the other hand, would deliberately highlight the various prevalent religious superstitions, social abuses, and the practice of sati in Indian society, while systematically ignoring the burning of heretics, practice of slavery, and serfdom that occurred in European societies. Their prejudice was clearly reflected in the manner some of them have ridiculed Indian culture. Their writings were used to justify the British colonial rule. The 5 volumes of Cambridge History of India, published between 1922 to 1937 CE, were distinct examples of colonial historiography. Orientalist historiography. As seen earlier, many British scholar officials and historians justified colonial rule by denouncing prevalent Indian society as being crude, primitive, and savage. However, there were some scholar officials and historians who were curious to learn about early civilizations and countries of the East, particularly India, for whom they shared a feeling of admiration and respect. These scholars were known as Orientalists. In the very beginning, the Orientalists sought to establish a connection between Indian and European history, as they believed that India, like Europe, possessed a great and glorious past. In that regard, they studied the similarities prevailing between Sanskrit and some European languages. They focused their study on Vedic tradition and Sanskrit literature. Sir William Jones, a great British philologist, that is, an individual who studied historical languages, and the most prominent linguistic scholar and philosopher of his time, aimed to establish a connection between Indian and the European languages. Eventually, he was able to establish a linguistic connection between Sanskrit, Greek, and Latin, and by doing so formulated the notion of an ancient language which could be regarded as the mother of all Indo-European languages. In 1784 CE, he founded the Asiatic Society of Bengal in Calcutta, in Kolkata, which opened the doors for research in ancient Indian literature and history. Among the Orientalist scholars, the name of Friedrich Max Müller deserves a special mention. He was deeply interested in Sanskrit literature and was of the opinion that Sanskrit was the oldest of the Indo-European languages. He translated the Sanskrit text Hitopadesha, which was similar to another ancient Sanskrit text, Panchatantra, in German. He was the editor of 50 volumes of the Sacred Books of the East, which was published between 1879 to 1910. CE. He also compiled and translated the Rigveda in German, which has been published in 6 volumes. During the 20th century CE, Edward Said, a scholar and professor of literature at Columbia University, in his book Orientalism, 1978, had re-evaluated the Orientalistic writings whilst throwing light on the imperialistic interests of Orientalist scholars. Nationalist historiography. Indian scholars and historians who were trained in the British educational system never wanted Western civilization to displace the Indian civilization as the Christian missionaries had desired. Rather, they only wanted the West to revitalize Indian culture, as Raja Ram Mohan Roy had emphasized in the mid-18th century CE. Consequently, they undertook steps to reform the age-old Indian socio-religious scenario and thereby rejuvenate ancient Indian culture. Through their writings, they began to instill one's pride in the ancient glory of India and a sense of self-reliance, self-respect, and self-confidence among the Indians, which was suppressed for a long period. Since their writings bred national consciousness on a large scale and aspired for freedom from the foreign rule, it is known as nationalist historiography. Nationalistic writings in Maharashtra were spearheaded by Vishnu Shastri Chiplunkar. He criticized the prejudiced history of ancient India written by British scholar officials. Chiplunkar, like other nationalistic historians, aimed to revive the golden era of Indian history. On the other hand, nationalistic historians were at times blamed for ignoring the critical analysis of historical truth. Besides Vishnu Shastri Chiplunkar, Mahadev Govind Ranade, Ramkrishna Gopal Bhandarkar, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, Rajendra Lal Mishra, Ramesh Chandra Mazumdar, Kashi Prasad Jaiswal, Radha Kumud Mukherjee, Bhagwan Lal Indraji, Vasudev Vishnu Mirashi, and Anant Sadashiv Altekar were some of the renowned nationalist historians. Justice Mahadev Govind Ranade, in his book The Rise of Maratha Power, 1900, had explained the background of the rise of Maratha Empire between 1674 to 1818 CE. According to him, this epoch-making development had not occurred as a sudden forest fire. Rather, its preparations in Maharashtra on social, cultural, and religious levels had continued over a prolonged period. Vishwanath Kashinath Rajwade was an eminent historian, scholar, writer, commentator, and orator from Maharashtra. He was well known for his writings in Marathi on varied subjects like history, linguistics, etymology, grammar, etc. He was of a firm opinion that Indians should write their own history. He compiled and edited 22 volumes of Marathyanच्या Itihasaची Sadhane, History of the Marathas. He also wrote scholarly prefaces to each of these 22 volumes. He stated, history is the all-inclusive image of past societies. It does not include only stories of political images, conspiracy, and wars for seizing power. He insisted that history was to be written using authentic documentary sources. V.K. Rajwade founded the Bharat Itihas Samshodak Mandal in Pune on 7th July 1910 CE to facilitate historical research. V.K. Rajwade often used to say, human history is defined by time and place. Describing of any event necessitates that the final portrayal should be spread on the complete canvas of the given time and place. Only if a balanced combination of three factors, time, space, and personalities, is present, then only an event does qualify to be called so. As mentioned earlier, nationalist historiography helped trigger the Indian independence movement. In this aspect, a book entitled The Indian War of Independence 1909, written by Swatantriya Veer Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, was of great importance. Throughout the years, nationalist historiography provided a momentum to the writing of regional histories as well. As a result, numerous historians turned their attention towards the study of geographic conditions and history of South Indian regions. Historiography in the post-independence era, along with writings of dynastic histories, cultural, social, economic histories were being written as well. The post-independence era scholars and historians felt the need of writing histories of various communities, sciences, economic systems, political ideologies, cultural aspects, etc. The historiography of this era has been influenced mainly by three ideological schools: Marxist history, subaltern history, feminist history. Marxist history. During the 20th century CE, another school of thought arose which presumed that ancient history could be studied within the framework of social sciences. The interpretation of these historians were derived from the historical philosophy of Karl Marx, that is, dialectical materialism. The essence of this new approach comprised the study of relationship between social and economic organizations and their effect on historical events. Concern for the means and modes of production and industrial relations were at the center of the writings of Marxist historians. Accordingly, analysis of the impact of every significant social event had remained the basic theme of Marxist historiography. Indian Marxist historians ideally studied historical transitions within the framework of the caste system. Among the notable Indian historians who adopted Marxist ideological framework, scholars like Damodar Dharmanand Kosambi, Comrade Shripad Amrit Dange, Ram Sharan Sharma, Comrade Sharad Patil have made significant contributions, wherein Comrade Dange was also one of the founder members of the Indian Communist Party. A book entitled Primitive Communism to Slavery, 1949, written by him, represented Marxist historiography. Subaltern history. The seeds of subaltern history were supposed to be half sowed in the Marxist historiography. The term subaltern, which translated to bottommost ranks, whether of class, caste, age, gender, or office, was coined by the Italian Marxist philosopher, historian, and politician Antonio Gramsci. He played an important role in developing the idea that history should be written starting from the bottommost ranks of people in the society. Folklore was considered to be an important source for writing subaltern histories. Ranajit Guha, an Indian historian, played a major role in establishing subaltern history as an important academic school of historiography. His elementary aspects of peasant insurgency in colonial India, 1983, is widely considered to be a classic. However, it was observed that much before the onset of subaltern ideology, similar thoughts and ideas were expressed by Mahatma Jyotirao Phule and Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Mahatma Phule unfolded the history of the Shudrati Shudra, terms indicating the bottommost ranks in the caste system, communities, in his book Gulamgiri, 1873. In this book, he drew attention to the exploitation of women, Shudras and Ati Shudras, done in the name of religion. The role which people belonging from Dalit, untouchable castes played in the shaping of various cultural and political aspects of India was very significant. However, this was not duly acknowledged in colonial and nationalist historiography. Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar, the architect of the Constitution of India and champion of the Dalits, would consistently highlight this glaring oversight in his writings. Two of his books, Who Were the Shudras and The Untouchables, Who Were They and Why They Became Untouchables, may be cited as examples of subaltern historiography. Feminist history. Over a significant period of time, many Indian scholars and historians, chiefly male, were involved in the rewriting of Indian history. As a result, the role and achievements of women throughout history remained neglected. This Herculean task of highlighting achievements of women throughout the pages of male-centric history was undertaken by the feminist historians. The chief objective of the feminist school of historiography was to study and compile the historical writings from women's point of view. Furthermore, it aimed to rethink women's position in history. The foremost feminist author of the 19th century CE was Tarabai Shinde. In her writings, she attacked the chauvinistic male mentality, the male dominated social system, and the prevailing caste system. Her book, Stri Purush Tulana, a comparison between women and men, published in 1882 CE, is acknowledged as the first modern feminist book in India. In 1888 CE, another book written by Pandita Ramabai, entitled The High Caste Hindu Woman, was published. The feminist literature of the post-independence era focused on issues such as employment of women, treatment meted out to them at their workplace, their right to political equality, etc. Among the recently published feminist literature, Meera Kosambi's book, Crossing Thresholds, Feminist Essays in Social History, 2007, is of great importance. It contained essays on the life stories of women like Pandita Ramabai, one of the first feminist activists in 19th century India, and Rukhamabai, the first practicing lady doctor in British India. Though countless literature is available which unfolded the viewpoint of Dalit women in Maharashtra, a special mention is to be made of Dr. Sharmila Rege's work, which was noteworthy in this context. Her book, Writing Caste, Writing Gender, Narrating Dalit Women's Testimonies, 2006, includes essays on the autobiographies of Dalit women. Other historians. There were a number of Indian historians whose writings were not influenced by a particular ideology. Among them, names such as Sir Jadunath Sarkar, Surendranath Sen, Govind Sakharam Sardesai, also known as Riyasatkar, and Trayambak Shankar Shedzwalkar are noteworthy. The publication of the Maratha Riyasat by Govind Sakharam Sardesai was a momentous achievement in the field of Indian historiography. His work became so popular that people began to address him as Riyasatkar. He also published several volumes of Maratha history. During the recent times, historians like Yashwant Dinkar Phadke, Ramchandra Guha, etc. have contributed extensively to the historiography of modern India. Conclusion.